Check, check. Testing, testing. All right. We are live. All right, Dennis, go ahead.
So welcome to this edition, the August edition of Legal AI Live. Matt's been telling us that our audience has been really growing, and we've been getting some really interesting responses that I'm going to share one with you a little bit later. But let's introduce the group. I'm Dennis Kennedy, the director of the Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation at Michigan State University, and involved in a whole bunch of other things around legal technology and AI. Matt?
And I'm Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney. I am a practitioner serving small business owners in Illinois on the subscription model, leveraging AI up the wazoo. And I'm the host of a podcast, Law Subscribed, where I interview folks about how they're ditching the billable hour using AI to deliver differently priced legal services.
Guess let's go to Greg.
So, Greg Kuchansky, Vice President of Thought Leadership at the American Arbitration Association. I'm building a think tank there, and I'm also building a lot with AI.
I will say, Greg, that Tom Isle and I interviewed your boss, Bridget McCormick, for our podcast yesterday. So
that's
coming
great.
Out in 2 weeks.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, she was great, as you know. Jonathan.
I'm John Nestler. I'm a practicing lawyer down in Springfield, Illinois. And I've been interested in legal technology for a long, long time. When AI really first kind of hit the public awareness when ChatGPT was released, I got highly involved with the Illinois State Bar Association, ARDC, and the Illinois Supreme Court Task Force on trying to help lawyers understand artificial intelligence and hopefully how to implement it in their daily practice in a safe and usable way. So that's what I've been spending my time doing.
Okay, and Ben, I think you can reveal something to us that we hinted about last week, or last month, I guess.
2 months ago, actually. People are waiting. The people need to know.
Yes, well, the person in the most suspense, I think, was my mother. But yes, as of about 3 weeks ago, I'm now an innovation strategist at Affinity Consulting, where I am focused on AI and Microsoft 365. And you might think that means just Copilot, but it means more than Copilot. So it's exciting. It's a return to the work I did before I was working at Microsoft. Although it's 10 years later, I posted, it's not my first rodeo, but my last rodeo was 10 years ago. So I need to tighten my saddle a little bit. It's been really fun and interesting to get caught up on everything that's changed in legal tech in the last 10 years.
And Damien, how about you?
Hey, everybody. Damien Real, lawyer for about 15 years with a big firm, Robbins Kaplan, where I represented Bernie Madoff victims and big retailers. Then I left for Thomson Reuters, where I led a team of 100 programmers building a big thing for them, and then did cybersecurity after that. But these days, I spend my days building for VLEX, which you might know just got acquired by Clio for $1 billion. So that acquisition is going to happen, finalized in about a month or so. But I build in the morning, and I talk about the stuff I've built in the afternoon. That is, I'm a crappy coder since 1985, and I talk about the stuff I built in the afternoon to be able to then build it then the next morning.
Cool. Well, it's great to have you all. And I like to start out so the premise of this is that I didn't feel that there was enough, and Matthew agreed, out there about like the practical ways that lawyers were using AI. So a lot of theory, a lot of, ideas, but not, I wanted to learn what people were actually doing. So that's the sort of premise of this show. And so I like to start out every episode with something I do in my law school class, and I did it every class, and I call it, what did I try in AI? And I just wanted to see what people were doing. So we got this great email from Andrew Stevens, and I'm going to, before I talk about what it is I've been trying in AI, but I thought this was really instructive and shows the sequence of how lawyers are adapting AI. And so he says, I recently had my eyes opened by an unlikely source, a pro se plaintiff journalist here in Michigan who is wielding ChatGPT like a seasoned litigator in condominium cases. While the pro se cannot effectively explain or argue the content generated, I am forced to spend a significant amount of time responding to numerous filings. Watching this unfold sent me searching for better ways to integrate AI into my own work, and that's how I discovered your podcast. And that is a key point I think that lawyers need to think about. So then he says, The results have been transformative. I'm now using AI to cross-check my insurance defense bills against carrier guidelines, catching compliance issues before they become reductions by the third-party bill review companies. Combined with Billable's AI drafting time, the AI drafting time entries in the background, I reclaimed hours each week that I can dedicate to actual legal strategy. And I think this just sums up how things are happening with lawyers and how lawyers who are struggling with AI. This is a great sequence. And then he sent us a link, which I don't think we can share. I don't know what you think, Matthew, but from a Wall Street Journal article talking about how McKinsey, the big consulting company, is repositioning for an AI-driven consulting future. And he finds the parallels to what's happening in legal services striking. I actually agree with him. And so I think that's really instructive. But so I was thinking about what it is I've been doing, and there have been a lot of things, but it comes down to this. I'm using personas or characters to create AI advisors in a number of ways. So simplest example is I decided I want to redo my home office. And so I created an AI expert designer. I gave him the skills, the expertise of a home office designer. And then I gave it a whole bunch of context about what interests me, what I did, what I wanted to do, budget, all those sorts of things. And it walked me through what I wanted to, what I could do. We did a whole bunch of iterations, but it would do things like you want the blue chair, not the black chair. So it's incredibly helpful, in a lot of ways. And I just found it fascinating. And it's just opened up this whole area of personal advisors. And it's in a way, it's like what Andrew was saying is you're saying, I have this thing that I need to do, and I'm not very good at. What if I just tried AI on that? And that's what I found. So totally happy. We disagreed a fair amount, but it also will show you the iterations and how that can help you. Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, just really quick, long-time listeners, watchers will not be surprised to know I'm still playing around a lot inside of Notebook LM Pro. It has really just gotten better even in the last 30 days. Right now, instead of having to generate only one audio summary at a time, you now have a log of all the audio summaries that you've generated, and you could delete them or remove them or save them. So now it's actually creating a history with those audio overviews. Now you could also do video overviews, which is huge. And I'll tell you what, it takes a long time to generate them, but man, are they accurate. And I'm, again, just like I use any AI tool, I'm doing it with information I'm intimately familiar with when I explore it for the first time to see how accurate it is. When I put in, I had it create a video overview without any instruction, because I feel like that's how a lot of people are going to use it the first time. They're just going to click the button. They're not going to instruct it, but you can instruct it. And it was all of the times that I've given talks that are available on YouTube. I have in a notebook. And so the only thing I got wrong was it misspelled one of the legal tech tools that I'm using, which has a funky spelling. I mean, unbelievable. So if I wanted to give a presentation about me, I could just use it whole cloth without that little misspelling, but nobody else is really going to know. And it's ready to go without any prompting, which is wild. And then, yeah, there are some other things I used. I'm building out a new website for something that I can't talk about much yet. But when designing it and trying to get the right color choices, something wasn't quite working. So we put a screenshot into Gemini and asked it which color hex codes kind of similar to what we're going for would actually work and mesh better. And it suggested 3 different hex codes, but really favored one of them, and it explained why. And when we used it, it was perfect. So all in on Gemini, really loving it.
I love Gemini too. How about you, Greg?
Well, Matthew and I were talking before we went on live that, there are these kind of two approaches, people who are more using the wrappers around the models and people who are interacting directly with the models. And I definitely fall into the latter category. So I haven't been using many, purpose-built tools that are out there. But, as I think I mentioned last time, I've been looking a lot at knowledge graphs as a way to structure relationships between information and a knowledge base rather than feeding GPT or whatever, just a set of documents. And I'm finding that's very powerful, particularly for constructing narratives around very large projects, or you can imagine writing an annual report based on, millions of words of information about an organization's operations over the course of a year. So that's kind of what I've mostly been thinking about really deeply over the last month.
Cool. What about you, John?
I'm kind of like you, Dennis, in the sense that in my life, I tend to think, let's see what I can do, what AI can do with this. So I use it in all sorts of ways. I'll stick with the professional. One of the ways I've been using it in practice is I interact directly with the model, like Greg suggested. Wrappers are great, but I think that if you know how to use the models well, they tend to give really great results. So as an example, I use OpenAI primarily when I'm doing legal work. And what I'll do is I will maybe find a CLE or the cases that I want the model to reference. I'll create a project in OpenAI. And then what you can do when you create a project is it gives you access to what's called instructions, which is really the same as what's known as a system prompt. So you can kind of direct the system on how you want it to act. I'll upload the PDFs. For instance, maybe I'm researching a medical malpractice case. I'll just download the IICLE PDF on medical malpractice. If I know some cases that are helpful to what I'm thinking about, I'll upload those, append them as PDFs, and then just talk to it. And so using the system prompt, I can direct it to rely more heavily on the PDFs that I've uploaded as opposed to hallucinating or as opposed to, coming up with its own answers. And when you kind of start that way, it gives you really accurate information and a really great kind of beginning approach to solving a legal problem. And oftentimes it's enough to just solve it right there. So that's something I've been using it a lot in my daily practice in a way to eliminate hallucinations to the best we can, but also discuss the topics more precisely that I want to discuss. So that's been really great.
Yeah, I like that. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the assistants. I have, I don't know, 8 or 10 maybe GPT assistants set up for personal stuff. Everything from news to sports to the one I've been using probably the most extensively lately is my family's house hunting a little bit. And so I've done kind of exactly a variation of what you described, where I've got the assistant set up and told it what we're looking for in a house and what our must-haves are and what our nice-to-haves are and all that kind of thing, and what geographic areas we're interested in. And it's been pretty helpful. On a professional level, this week I'm spending a lot of time creating new training sessions. So I've been using Copilot to help out with that. And so I'll create a description paragraph or two of what I want the training, very loose, of what I want the particular session to cover, and give it a draft title, which doesn't always persist. In fact, rarely persists to the actual session. And then what I do is I go to Copilot and I say, create an outline for a 1-hour presentation to an audience of attorneys on this topic. And I paste in the description and the draft title. And it does. And the outline it gives me is good, not perfect, but pretty good. And then I can go in, I often make some suggestions like remove section 2 and, expand section 4 and things like that. And then it's done that, I paste that into OneNote. And then I make some edits to it myself there. I go through and tweak it. Once I'm happy with it, I've been going back to Copilot then in BizChat, the Copilot chat, and I'll say, create a Word document based on this OneNote page. And I use the /picker to pick the OneNote page. And I give it some more instruction about voice and tone and length and things like that in the prompt. And then it creates a Word document, draft Word document, which should be a handout for the class based on the outline. So it does an okay job with the document. I find the documents are a little shorter than I would like, so I've had to go through and ask it to expand on certain sections. And of course, I'm adding a lot of my own stuff too, but it's been great to get me sort of from, I've often said that the real value there is getting you from a blank page to a plausible first draft in seconds, right? And it's done that. I mean, I probably created content for 10 classes in 2 hours, right? In outline and documents. Next up, I'll make slide decks, but yeah, it's been a real accelerator.
Great. How about you, Damon?
I think that greetings from just on the tail end of my vacation. I literally just walked in the door, which is the reason that I'm a little bit late. We spent the whole week up north in Minnesota, where I am right now, about 10 miles north of Lake Wobegon of Garrison Keillor days. And so I spent the last week thinking about maybe we want to buy a lake cabin. This is something we thought about for a bunch of years. So I used large language models because it is, after all, 2025. And I said, what kind of investment advice? Do I want to get a mortgage, or do I want to, instead invest in stocks, or should I just buy the the house outright? And then should I rent it as an Airbnb or should I do a VRBO? And then I took all those scenarios and I said, now give me legal advice to say, what are the liability differences? Do I have the LLC own the cabin, or should I own it outright and essentially let the LLC essentially rent it out as a VRBO? And it did that legal research. And of course, then I did that not just in Gemini, which is kind of my go-to for deep research, but I also did that with ChatGPT deep research. I also did that with Perplexity deep research. So this is a mixture of experts. And then I took all three of those memoranda that came out. Each of the memoranda was about 50 pages per, so that's about 150 pages. And I threw that 450 pages into Claude, and I said, here are three memos, consolidate them and explain them in multi-level bullets. And then it gave me really good thought, that mixture of experts. And so I think of this, so my day job is building these kind of systems for lawyers. But what I've just described is what I call the accordion theory, where you start with a small prompt, and then it accordions out to 150 pages, and then you have to bring it back in. So this idea is something that we should be thinking about more as lawyers, to say that, you have to start with a small question, expand out, and then make it simple for your clients. But of course, this isn't just lawyers using this. This is actually clients using this, or potential clients using this. So as the large language model tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, as they get more of the cases, the statutes, and the regulations, to be able to get yesterday's case and to be able to know that Roe v. Wade is no longer good law, how much of a role is lawyers going to play? Or are lawyers going to play? If I can, option one, ask ChatGPT of this with yesterday's case versus asking a lawyer this, we as lawyers used to be gatekeepers to the law, and maybe we're not gatekeepers anymore, or maybe we shouldn't be gatekeepers. And how much of what we're providing as lawyers is legal information versus legal advice? Because if we're just giving legal information, ChatGPT can give that. Because whenever a client would say to me, hey, what is the law? And I would say, well, the law on this is X, Y, and Z. And they'd say, cool, what should I do? I'd say, oh, wait. That's a business decision. I'm going to lay out the risks, but you need to decide. So really, the question that all of us need to ask is, how much of what we're giving is legal information or is legal advice, but actually legal information? I would say that 90% of what I did plus is legal information, not legal advice. And if AI can provide that legal information in the way that I described with buying a lake home and liability for that, maybe the way that we as lawyers provide value beyond what we do today, maybe that value is in actually providing advice and saying, this is what I know from my closed door meetings of all the settlements that I've gone through, all the negotiations. This is stuff that ChatGPT doesn't have that I have. And maybe we should focus more on the stuff stuck in our brains rather than being gatekeepers to legal information.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating, because I think we're, very swiftly moving into this area of the savvy client, where the client's going to come in and instead of like, I Googled this, right? I talked to a Google lawyer. Now you have the AI, and they're going to be very precise in their questions. And if you're saying to them, oh, that's just business advice or whatever, they're going to go like, well, why am I paying you? There's one other thing I did, and I don't know whether we'll get the chance to talk about this too much, but it's a technique I use. But I talked to a group of high school students who are part of the Ford Law Career Academy in Detroit. And it's this experimental program designed to help kids who are interested in law get prepared for law. So I'm talking to, this is a hard audience, Ben, as you know, it's harder than even talking to senior lawyers. So you got like 15, 16, 17-year-old students. And so I'm like, what am I going to do here? And so the way I was using AI was to say, this is my audience. Like, what can I do that would most help this audience? What would appeal to them? What should I even try to make pop culture things? Because I'm going to look foolish. And it identified like, no, this one's okay. This one's not okay. Those kinds of things. And then when I gave the talk, there were like at certain places where I just felt I had them in the palm of my hand. They were like totally interested. And it was some of the stuff that the AI suggested. And so I'm doing that a lot when I do speaking and stuff, is to say, act as a stand-in for the audience. And if you're in this audience, what are the questions you would like to have answered? What would you consider the successful? So that's another way. And I think some lawyers who are the litigators are doing this, are also taking that sort of approach to say, act as a stand-in for the jury. What would the jury want to know? And then they will tailor their presentation in those ways. So I want to jump topics to something that I personally think is really significant for lawyers, and I think it is going to kind of surface what is a growing problem, which is, do we have lawyers who can actually represent companies and others and individuals who are working in the AI field? And so that is the new US AI action plan that came out. And so normally you go, oh, executive orders, do they really mean anything? And so I was looking at this, I'm like, we're talking about winning the AI race. We're talking about not having regulations. This is really accelerator to the floor kind of stuff. And, I think it has implications, and the companies, especially that are going to move with this freedom that is opened up, are going to need lawyers who can help them. And if we're still trying to decide what the policy in our firm is, or whether we're going to pay $20 a month for ChatGPT, I don't know that we have the lawyers who can advise those people. So I'm curious what people are thinking about. It's really hard to believe that actually something could come into law in AI that seems like law that would have impact. But my feeling is this actually could, because of the way people act on it. I'm curious what other people might think.
Nikki Black had a really good thing on this the other day where she talked about that. We all can look to precedent because we're lawyers. She said the precedent of social media, we've kind of been here before. That I think about 10 years earlier, that the lawyers that said, no, I'm never going on Twitter, never going to go on LinkedIn, never going to go on these things because that's for the, lightweights, I'm a heavyweight. But those who actually jumped in to do that then learned how the systems worked better, and then were able to advise their clients better on what social media meant. And they're, as a litigator, be able to say, oh, actually, maybe there's a treasure trove of social media information I can pull from this. So those who kind of put their heads in the sand on the, jumping into social media, they failed to do that. And then the people who jumped in were able to reap the benefits. So I wonder if it's the same versus the AI for law. That is, people that use AI for legal work can know more about the law of AI to know what the weaknesses are, what the risks are, and that kind of stuff. Because if you don't actually jump in, of course, you're not going to know it. So Nikki Block, kudos to her on really saying this. Yes, we've seen this movie before in social media, and I think we're going to see it again today in AI.
Yeah. So what do others think? I feel this sort of win the AI race is really kind of unleashing things. And so the acceleration of AI, which is already like way too fast, let's admit it, is potentially getting faster. Other thoughts on that and how it might impact either your practice or what you see the needs are of either, the clients that you have, the people that you're hiring, other things like that.
Yeah, when I was reading the action plan, it made me think about, John F. Kennedy saying that, but we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And it kind of had that sort of scope of ambition to it. But yeah, I mean, there's not much talk about ethics in there, aside from talking maybe a bit about deepfakes. And, I think it may fall to lawyers to really be the ethical guardrails in this, very green field that action plan lays out. And I don't think you can do that effectively if you don't understand the technology and haven't worked with it yourself.
Matthew, John, Ben?
I've got another thought. So that we are riding the exponential. That is the human intelligence, and intelligence is going up. We went from beating, elementary school kids to high school kids to college kids to now beating PhDs in physics. And so the idea is that the intelligence is going exponentially up at the same time that the cost of that intelligence is going exponentially down. It used to cost $50 per million tokens just 2 years ago, and now it costs 50 cents per million tokens. So intelligence goes up, cost goes down. We as economists know, of course, what happens then is you then use way more intelligence. So to answer Dennis's question, as we think about what we need to hire for, you could hire a human that is not going to get more intelligent like AI is, and it's going to continue to be more expensive than AI is. So how much back office things can I do to be able to maybe have AI do that work? And then how can I maybe shrink my costs as a law firm to be able to then serve the unserved? That is the 92% of legal needs that are unmet because we lawyers are too expensive. Maybe we can have that increased intelligence and decreased costs serve that 92%. That is, serve the poor and middle class that currently can't afford us at a price point that is massive. It's small individually, but in the aggregate, massive. Economists call that 92% an untapped market. So if we tap that untapped market using AI's increased intelligence and decreased cost, we can make way more money as lawyers.
Yeah. So Matthew, what are your? And I think this has potential impact on the subscription model as well as we move forward. So there's sort of a couple things. As there is this acceleration that the government ostensibly is approving, and that we have what I call the rise of the savvy client. It just, to me, it falls into subscription as an approach, because what I want to do, and what I told these high school students is, when I told them about the gap, the 75% of self-represented, the 90% who can't, plus percent who can't afford, and I said, truth be told, I, as a lawyer, and my colleagues as lawyers could not afford to hire lawyers at our own hourly rates to cover what we want to do. And that their jaws just drop. But I think that there are some drivers out there, Matthew, as you think about the subscription model. But I think that the savvy client is going to be saying, I just want to hire you for what I need you for.
Well, Dennis, why would you think I know anything about the subscription model? I can't even not start to smile as I tried to say that. It's like, do I even have the word subscribed somewhere like behind me? If you're just an audio listener, you got to watch the video. Yeah. I mean, look, I've been saying for years, right? Like before, for over 4 years now, really, like before AI in its present form hit the scene, like the business model of law needs to shift. And that was even before I had a huge perspective on the actual numbers of what the latent legal market potential is, right? You're talking about over $1 trillion market opportunity that just billable hours won't serve, regardless of the new regulation, regardless of AI, right? It's just that the new regulation and AI just gives all the more incentive to do that. For me, not even from a legal perspective, but with everything going on with AI and regulating or not regulating it, for me, it comes down to the energy question, right? We should have been building nuclear power plants for the last 30 years. That's what we should have been doing, right? We need as much energy as possible, as fast as possible, and now. And it is kind of scary to think about. And I'll get this question. I'm sure some of you all get this question too. Aren't you worried about the environmental impact? I'm not using AI because, the environmental impact. Well, are you not driving a car? There's environmental impact with that, right? But also, driving a car is not going to solve the energy crisis or the climate change problems. AI might help us do that, right? So we need all the energy in all of its forms. And I'm totally behind that. I didn't used to be. If you would have asked me in high school and I was learning an environmental science class, how bad, everything is. But I really think AI, going back to Damien's comment on the exponential growth curve that we're in, depending on your age, your grandparent or your great-grandparent, was around maybe before motor vehicles were common. Look at how fast we have progressed technologically. We also might be in the second Gilded Age, which I heard recently, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective. My wife is watching the Gilded Age right now. I'm not watching it, but I hear it's really good television. Who has time for TV? Can I just have AI summarize the Gilded Age for me? So yeah, I mean, that's just my perspective on it. Is I think that we have to let loose everything as far as energy is concerned. And there are legal ramifications of that. But for me as a practitioner, in my everyday, this doesn't change anything for me.
How about you, Ben?
Yeah,
What's your thinking along these lines?
I think that I read something the other day that it's going to be harder and harder for attorneys who are charging billable because clients are getting more savvy about AI themselves. And even if they don't really know, they know it exists. And so you're going to have to start answering that question, why did it take you 10 hours to do this? Couldn't AI have just done it in 2 or in 2 seconds? And so even if there's a good answer why the AI couldn't have done it, you're going to have that answer. It's not just going to be the old days where you sent them a bill and they paid the bill, hopefully. Increasingly, whether you're using the AI or not, you're going to have to start answering questions from clients about why you're not using it or why you're billing them what you're billing them if you are using it.
Billing model.
Exactly right. And that's a big part. That's where a lot of that pressure on the billing model is going to come from is clients starting to wonder, why are you charging me hourly for this? Isn't this more, or maybe that's your response to them asking that question is, okay, we need to switch to
Yeah, and who's going to be the first client who says, I put this into AI and this is what I think the fee for this should be?
Twice this week, I have gotten 2 documents generated by AI that clients have sent me saying like, hey, I used ChatGPT to do the first draft, right? And I'm like, well, okay, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it into Paxton and I'm going to tell Paxton, like, just use this as a guideline for what my client wants. But here's what we're actually going to draft, right? And here are the clauses you need to have in there, right? And like, here's like what actually is, but just use this as a guidepost for like the desires of the clients. But also, it's not just billable hours, by the way. Contingency model firms, it's coming for that too. Because if you could get to end results faster, right? Like as soon as I learned about the startup Even Up, I was like, wow, like personal injury firms cannot be charging 33% anymore. Like, cause you just get to end results faster, and there's still value there. But like when all this work is doing all this technology is doing so much of the work now, like, is it really worth 33%? Real estate agents, get like, a much smaller commission, for selling a home. So I just think that there might be somewhere between what real estate agents are getting, like between 3 to 6% and like 33%, somewhere in that middle is probably where we're going to start seeing some personal injury attorneys and other contingency fee-based work like go further down and be able to take on more work. So like the revenues will go up. Don't get me wrong.
Right. And well, you can settle what needs to be settled, which is what people want. And I think the contingency, where the vulnerability is, at least as I think about it, is that if it's 33% or 40% in some states, and that's one thing if you say it goes all the way to trial and all this sort of thing. But if you settle it immediately, I'm like, why am I paying a third, right? Shouldn't it be like 5%, 10%, something like that? And the other thing that will come up is litigation finance, right? Where you say, can we identify those things in my non-litigator understanding of litigation finance? Can we identify these high value, quick settlements that with AI that we can invest in and turn over really quickly at a high profit, which is a venture capital type of concept. So Jonathan, let's get some of your thoughts on this.
That ends part 1 of this month's Legal AI Live. Make sure to subscribe to the Legal AI Live podcast at legalailive.com to catch part 2. You could also subscribe to our new YouTube channel or on any podcast app, just search Legal AI Live, and follow the Legal AI Live page on LinkedIn. See you next episode.